Marcus Rodriguez stepped off the military transport bus at Fort Braxton with a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder and determination etched across his weathered face. At 28, he was older than most new recruits entering the elite Special Operations training program, and the age difference showed. While the other candidates appeared fresh-faced and eager, Marcus carried the quiet intensity of someone who had already faced life's harder lessons. The son of a Mexican immigrant mechanic and an Irish-American nurse, Marcus had grown up in the tough neighborhoods of Detroit where survival meant learning to fight before you learned to read properly. His father, Miguel, had worked double shifts at the auto plant to keep food on the table, while his mother, Sarah, pulled night shifts at the hospital. Money was always tight, but the Rodriguez household was rich in values that would later serve Marcus well in the military. As a teenager, Marcus had fallen in with the wrong crowd. The streets offered quick money and a sense of belonging that his overworked parents couldn't provide. By 17, he was running numbers for a local gang and had been arrested twice for minor infractions. It was during his second stint in juvenile detention that he met Sergeant First Class James Morrison, an Army recruiter who visited the facility monthly. Morrison saw something in Marcus that others missed. Beneath the tough exterior and defensive attitude was a young man with natural leadership qualities and an untapped reservoir of discipline. After months of conversations through the chain-link fence of the detention center's recreation yard, Morrison convinced Marcus to consider the military as an alternative to the path he was heading down. The transformation wasn't immediate. Marcus struggled through basic training, not because he lacked physical ability, but because years of anti-authority attitudes died hard. He clashed with drill sergeants, got into fights with fellow recruits, and nearly washed out 3 times. But something kept pulling him back to the challenge. Perhaps it was the memory of his father's calloused hands after 16-hour workdays, or his mother's exhausted face as she headed to another overnight shift. Marcus knew he needed to become something more than the streets had planned for him. After barely graduating basic training, Marcus spent 4 years in the regular Army infantry. He deployed twice to Afghanistan, where combat revealed both his natural tactical instincts and his ability to remain calm under pressure. His squad leaders began to notice that Marcus had an uncanny ability to read situations before they developed. He could sense an ambush minutes before it materialized and often positioned his fire team in advantageous positions without being told. During his second deployment, Marcus's convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device outside Kandahar. The blast killed 2 soldiers instantly and left 3 others severely wounded. With the convoy commander unconscious and enemy fire raining down from surrounding buildings, Marcus took charge. Despite having no formal leadership training at that level, he coordinated the defense, called in medical evacuation, and kept his surviving team members alive for 3 hours until reinforcements arrived. The incident earned Marcus a Bronze Star with Valor, but more importantly, it caught the attention of Special Operations Command. The colonel who reviewed the after-action reports noted that Marcus had displayed leadership qualities that typically took years of training to develop. Within 6 months, Marcus received orders to report for Special Forces assessment and selection. Now standing in the humid North Carolina morning air, Marcus watched as nearly 200 other candidates filed off similar buses. The diversity was striking. College graduates with perfect physical fitness scores, former Rangers with combat experience, and even a few former professional athletes who had traded sports careers for military service. Many of them looked at Marcus with barely concealed skepticism. His appearance didn't help matters. While most candidates wore crisp new uniforms and polished boots, Marcus's gear showed the wear of actual use. His boots had been resoled twice, his uniform bore the faded rectangles where previous unit patches had been removed, and his face carried the lines that came from squinting against Afghan dust storms. He looked less like a candidate and more like someone who had wandered away from a regular unit. The whispering started during the initial formation. Marcus caught fragments of conversations as candidates sized each other up. Someone behind him wondered aloud if the army was lowering standards. Another suggested that Marcus looked more suited for mess hall duty than special operations. A particularly loud voice questioned whether guys like that had the education necessary for the sophisticated missions special forces conducted. Marcus had heard it all before. The assumptions about his background, his intelligence, his worthiness to stand among men who came from different worlds. He had learned not to react, not to give them the satisfaction of knowing their words found their mark. Instead, he focused on why he was there. The motivation wasn't glory or recognition. Marcus had seen enough combat to know that real heroism rarely came with fanfare. He was there because he had discovered something about himself in the mountains of Afghanistan. He had the ability to bring order to chaos and to make life-or-death decisions when others froze. More importantly, he had learned that he could bear the weight of other men's lives on his shoulders. The first weeks of selection were brutal by design. Candidates were pushed beyond normal human endurance to see who would quit and who would find reserves of strength they didn't know they possessed. Marcus watched as men who had looked supremely confident on day one began to crack under the pressure. The college graduates discovered that academic knowledge meant little when you were carrying a 70-pound rucksack through swamps at 3 in the morning. The former athletes learned that being in shape for sports was different from being in shape for special operations. But Marcus thrived. The physical challenges reminded him of the struggles of his youth, when every day had been a test of survival. The mental pressure felt familiar after years of making split-second decisions in combat. While other candidates complained about the food, the lack of sleep, and the constant stress, Marcus simply endured. He had lived through worse and survived circumstances that would have broken many of the men around him. The instructors began to notice. Not because Marcus was the fastest runner or the strongest candidate, but because he never quit. When others dropped out during particularly brutal exercises, Marcus kept moving. When the instructors played mind games designed to break down mental defenses, Marcus remained steady. He didn't seek attention or try to stand out, but his consistency under pressure made him impossible to ignore. Still, many of his fellow candidates continued to view him as an outsider. During rare moments of downtime, conversations would stop when he approached. Study groups formed without including him. The invisible barriers were as real as any physical obstacle they faced during training. Marcus understood the dynamics at play. Many of these men came from backgrounds where success had always been expected. They had attended prestigious universities, excelled in previous military schools, or dominated in competitive sports. They were accustomed to being the best at whatever they attempted. Marcus represented something that challenged their worldview, proof that excellence could emerge from unexpected places. The turning point came during the survival phase of selection. Candidates were divided into small groups and given minimal equipment before being dropped into remote wilderness areas. The mission was simple in concept but brutal in execution. Navigate to specific checkpoints over several days while avoiding enemy forces played by instructors, all while surviving on minimal food and water. Marcus found himself grouped with 3 other candidates who had made no effort to hide their displeasure with the assignment. Thompson was a former Navy officer who had graduated from the Naval Academy. Williams had been a star quarterback in college before joining the Army. Patterson held a master's degree in engineering and had already completed Ranger School with honors. The group dynamic was toxic from the beginning. Thompson assumed leadership based on his officer background and immediately began making decisions without consulting the others. Williams spent more time complaining about conditions than focusing on the mission. Patterson treated the exercise like an academic problem to be solved rather than a survival situation to be endured. Marcus initially tried to contribute suggestions based on his combat experience, but his ideas were dismissed or ignored. When he pointed out that their planned route would take them through an area where instructors were likely to set up an ambush, Thompson curtly reminded him that officers made tactical decisions. When Marcus suggested they conserve their limited water supply for when they really needed it, Williams laughed and asked if he had learned survival skills in the hood. By the second day, the group was lost, dehydrated, and behind schedule. Thompson's navigation had led them in circles. Williams was showing signs of heat exhaustion, and Patterson's theoretical knowledge proved useless when applied to real-world conditions. The instructors, playing the role of enemy forces, had captured them twice, forcing them to restart from previous checkpoints. As evening approached on the second day, the situation became critical. They had missed 2 mandatory check-ins, their water was nearly gone, and morale had collapsed completely. Thompson was still insisting on maintaining command, but his decisions were becoming increasingly erratic. Williams had begun talking about quitting the program entirely. Patterson sat staring at his map as if the answer would magically appear. It was then that Marcus made a decision that would define the rest of his military career. Rather than continue following failed leadership, he quietly began taking action. While the others argued about which direction to travel, Marcus studied the terrain and wind patterns. He had learned to read the land during his deployments, understanding that survival often depended on recognizing subtle signs that others missed. Marcus noticed that the vegetation grew differently on one side of their current position, suggesting the presence of water nearby. He also observed that certain birds were flying in consistent patterns, which his grandfather had once taught him indicated the location of roosting areas near water sources. Without announcing his intentions, Marcus began moving in that direction. Thompson initially ordered him to return to the group, but Marcus continued walking. Something in his demeanor, a quiet confidence that came from actual experience rather than theoretical knowledge, caused the others to follow despite their reservations. Within an hour, Marcus had led them to a small stream that didn't appear on their maps. The discovery changed everything. Not only did they have access to fresh water, but Marcus had positioned them in an area that provided natural concealment from the instructors conducting pursuit exercises. For the first time in 2 days, the group had a tactical advantage. But Marcus wasn't finished. As his teammates filled their water bottles, he began explaining what he had observed about instructor movement patterns over the previous days. He had noticed that the opposing forces followed predictable routes and timing, information that could be used to avoid future contact. More importantly, he had identified weaknesses in their search patterns that could be exploited. Thompson initially resisted Marcus's growing influence within the group, but the results spoke for themselves. Using Marcus's observations and recommendations, they successfully avoided 3 more instructor ambushes and reached their final checkpoint ahead of schedule. What had begun as a failing exercise turned into one of the most successful missions of the entire selection process. The other group members were forced to acknowledge that Marcus possessed skills and knowledge that their formal education and previous training had not provided. More than that, he demonstrated the kind of practical leadership that emerged naturally from experience rather than authority. He didn't need to give orders or assert dominance. People followed him because his decisions consistently proved correct. Word of the group's turnaround spread among the instructors. In their debriefs, all 3 of Marcus's teammates independently credited him with saving their chance to continue in the program. The instructors noted that Marcus had displayed exactly the kind of adaptive leadership that Special Forces missions required, the ability to take charge when circumstances demanded it, regardless of formal rank or structure. But the most significant change was in how other candidates began to view Marcus. The men who had dismissed him as unworthy began to seek his advice. During planning sessions for subsequent exercises, his input was not only welcomed but actively requested. The barriers that had isolated him began to crumble as his fellow candidates recognized that excellence came in many forms. Marcus remained modest about his contributions, deflecting credit and focusing on team success rather than personal recognition. This humility, combined with his proven competence, earned him a level of respect that couldn't be commanded or demanded. He had transformed from an outsider looking in to a leader that others wanted to follow. The selection process continued to weed out candidates, but Marcus never again faced questions about his worthiness to be there. He had proven himself in the most fundamental way possible, through performance under pressure when it mattered most. The lessons learned during those difficult days in the wilderness would serve him well in the challenges that lay ahead. As the first phase of his journey drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how far he had traveled from those Detroit streets. The angry young man who had once seen authority as the enemy had evolved into someone others looked to for guidance. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Marcus understood that becoming a Special Forces operator required more than physical strength or technical skills. It demanded the kind of character that could only be forged through genuine hardship and tested through real adversity. The foundation had been laid. Now it was time to build something extraordinary upon it. The graduation from selection to the Special Forces qualification course marked the beginning of Marcus's real education in unconventional warfare. The 18-month program would test every aspect of his character, intelligence, and adaptability. Unlike the physical and mental endurance tests of selection, the Q course demanded mastery of complex skills that ranged from foreign languages to advanced medical procedures to the delicate art of training foreign fighters. Marcus chose communications as his specialty, drawn to the technical challenges and the critical nature of the role. Communications sergeants were the lifeline between Special Forces teams and the outside world. In hostile territory, they were often the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The specialty required not just technical expertise, but the ability to improvise solutions when equipment failed and to maintain contact under the most adverse conditions. The academic workload was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. While his fellow students struggled with the technical manuals and complex theories, Marcus discovered that his unconventional background had prepared him in unexpected ways. Years of improvising solutions on Detroit streets had taught him to think creatively when standard approaches failed. His combat experience had shown him how systems worked under stress, not just in ideal conditions. But the real revelation came during the language training phase. Marcus had grown up in a bilingual household where Spanish and English flowed seamlessly together. His parents had insisted that he maintain fluency in both languages, even when teenage rebellion made him want to reject anything that marked him as different from his peers. Now that early foundation allowed him to rapidly absorb the nuances of Arabic, the language he was assigned based on anticipated regional deployments. While other students struggled with pronunciation and grammar, Marcus seemed to absorb the language naturally. He understood that true fluency went beyond memorizing vocabulary. It required understanding the cultural context that gave words their real meaning. During practice scenarios, Marcus would engage with role-playing instructors in ways that demonstrated cultural sensitivity as well as linguistic competence. The instructors began to notice that Marcus possessed an intuitive understanding of human nature that complemented his technical skills. During exercises simulating contact with foreign assets, he displayed an ability to read people and situations that typically took years of field experience to develop. He could sense when someone was lying, when they were genuinely frightened, and when they were testing the limits of American patience and resources. This combination of technical competence and human insight made Marcus a natural choice for increasingly complex training scenarios. He found himself selected for exercises that simulated some of the most challenging aspects of Special Forces missions, working with unreliable foreign partners, operating in denied territory with minimal support, and maintaining mission focus when everything went wrong simultaneously. One particular exercise would become legendary among his class. The scenario involved establishing communications with a resistance network in a simulated occupied territory. The resistance leaders, played by experienced instructors, were programmed to be suspicious, uncooperative, and prone to testing American resolve through various provocations. Marcus's team was inserted into the exercise area with minimal equipment and instructions to establish a functioning communication network within 72 hours. Previous teams had failed the exercise repeatedly, usually because they approached the resistance leaders as subordinates to be commanded, rather than allies to be convinced. Marcus took a different approach. Instead of immediately trying to establish his authority or demonstrate American technical superiority, he spent the first day simply observing and listening. He watched how the resistance fighters interacted with each other, noted their concerns and priorities, and identified the informal power structures that determined how decisions were actually made. When he finally made contact with the resistance leadership, Marcus didn't begin with technical specifications or operational timelines. Instead, he acknowledged the risks they were taking by working with Americans and asked about their families, their motivations for fighting, and their concerns about foreign involvement in their struggle. The conversation, conducted in fluent Arabic with appropriate cultural references, lasted 3 hours before any technical matters were discussed. The resistance leaders, played by instructors who had expected another typical American approach of efficiency over relationship building, found themselves genuinely engaged with Marcus's questions and concerns. When technical discussions finally began, they were in the context of shared objectives rather than imposed requirements. Marcus's communication network was established ahead of schedule and proved more robust than any previous attempt. But more importantly, the resistance fighters actively protected and supported the network because they felt ownership in its success. When the exercise concluded with a simulated enemy sweep designed to test network security, the resistance members voluntarily exposed themselves to additional risk to preserve the communications capability. The after-action review was unlike any the instructors had conducted. Rather than focusing on technical procedures or tactical execution, they found themselves discussing cultural awareness, relationship building, and the subtle art of earning trust across cultural boundaries. Marcus's approach had been so effective that it was incorporated into future training curricula. Word of Marcus's success spread beyond his immediate training unit. Senior Special Forces leaders began to take notice of the communications sergeant, who seemed to possess an unusual combination of technical skill and cultural intuition. His instructors noted in their evaluations that Marcus demonstrated the kind of mature judgment typically associated with much more experienced operators. But success in training brought its own challenges. As Marcus's reputation grew, so did the expectations placed upon him. He was selected for advanced courses that normally went to more senior personnel. His opinions were sought on training modifications and operational procedures. Other students began to look to him for leadership in ways that sometimes created awkward social dynamics. Marcus handled the attention with characteristic humility, always deflecting credit to team efforts and focusing on mission success rather than personal recognition. He understood that the skills he was developing carried life or death responsibilities. In real operations, his ability to maintain communications could determine whether wounded teammates received medical evacuation or whether surrounded teams could call for support. The weight of that responsibility became clear during the final exercise of his communications training. The scenario involved a team trapped behind enemy lines with their primary communication equipment damaged by an improvised explosive device. Marcus was inserted as part of a rescue element, but his real mission was to re-establish communication with the isolated team and coordinate their extraction. The exercise took place in a remote area of North Carolina during winter conditions that simulated the harsh environments where special forces often operated. Snow, freezing rain, and temperatures well below freezing added layers of complexity to an already challenging mission. The damaged equipment had been sabotaged in realistic ways that required both technical expertise and creative problem-solving to repair. Marcus spent the first night in a makeshift shelter, working by dim light to diagnose and repair communication equipment while his teammates provided security. The cold made fine motor control difficult, and the damaged components required modifications that weren't covered in any technical manual. Marcus had to draw upon every aspect of his training, from basic electronics theory to field expedient repair techniques. By dawn, he had managed to establish intermittent contact with the isolated team, but the signal was weak and unreliable. The team reported that they had wounded members who needed immediate medical attention and that enemy forces were actively searching for their position. Time was running out, and Marcus's improvised repairs were failing under the harsh conditions. The breakthrough came when Marcus remembered a technique his father had used to repair automotive electronics in the auto plant. Miguel Rodriguez had taught his son that sometimes the most sophisticated problems required the simplest solutions. Marcus applied this philosophy to his communication problem, using basic field materials to create a solution that worked better than complex technical fixes. The extraction was successful, but the lessons learned went far beyond technical procedures. Marcus had demonstrated that effective special forces operations required more than following prescribed methods. They demanded the ability to innovate under pressure and to draw upon every aspect of personal experience when conventional approaches failed. As his formal training neared completion, Marcus began to understand that becoming a special forces operator was about more than accumulating skills and knowledge. It required developing a mindset that embraced complexity, uncertainty, and the constant need to adapt to changing circumstances. The men who succeeded in special forces were those who could function effectively when standard operating procedures became irrelevant and when success depended on improvisation and judgment. Marcus's final evaluation scores placed him among the top graduates of his class, but the numbers only part of the story. His instructors noted that he possessed an unusual combination of technical competence, cultural awareness, and mature judgment that suggested significant potential for leadership roles. They recommended him for advanced training opportunities and noted that he should be considered for rapid promotion based on demonstrated performance. More importantly, Marcus had earned the respect and trust of his classmates. The men who would soon deploy to dangerous locations around the world knew that Marcus Rodriguez was someone they could count on when everything went wrong. In the tight-knit Special Forces community, that kind of reputation was more valuable than any formal recognition. The graduation ceremony was a modest affair, reflecting the Special Forces tradition of quiet professionalism over public display. Family members were invited, and Marcus was proud to have his parents in attendance. Miguel and Sarah Rodriguez had traveled from Detroit to watch their son receive the coveted Green Beret, a symbol of excellence that represented years of dedication and sacrifice. As Marcus stood in formation with his graduating class, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The angry teenager who had once seen authority as the enemy had evolved into a leader that others looked to for guidance. The streets of Detroit had taught him survival skills that proved invaluable in military training. The disappointments and setbacks of his youth had built the resilience needed to endure Special Forces selection and training. But Marcus also understood that graduation was not an endpoint. It was the beginning of a career that would test everything he had learned in ways that training could only approximate. Real operations would bring challenges that no exercise could fully simulate. The decisions he made in the field would have consequences that extended far beyond his own life and career. The first assignment came sooner than expected. Within weeks of graduation, Marcus received orders to report to a Special Forces unit preparing for deployment to a classified location in the Middle East. The mission details were sparse, but the urgency was clear. Regional conflicts were escalating, and experienced communication specialists were needed to support operations that couldn't wait for lengthy preparation periods. As Marcus packed his gear for deployment, he thought about the path that had led him from the streets of Detroit to the elite ranks of Special Forces. Every challenge he had faced, every setback he had overcome, and every lesson he had learned had prepared him for what lay ahead. The foundation was solid, the training was complete, and the real test was about to begin. His parents came to see him off, and Miguel Rodriguez pulled his son aside for a private conversation. The elder Rodriguez had worked with his hands all his life, building things that others depended upon to function properly. He understood the weight of responsibility his son was about to carry. "Remember who you are," Miguel told Marcus in Spanish, the language of their most intimate conversations. "Remember where you come from and why you fight. The uniform and the training are important, but they don't make the man. You were already a warrior when you put them on." Those words would echo in Marcus's mind as he boarded the transport aircraft that would carry him toward his first real test as a Special Forces operator. The training was over, the reputation was established, and the real work was about to begin. In distant mountains and hostile valleys, Marcus Rodriguez would discover whether the foundation built through years of struggle would be strong enough to support the weight of responsibility that came with wearing the green beret. The forward operating base nestled in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan looked like every other remote military outpost, a collection of prefabricated buildings, defensive walls, and communication towers surrounded by hostile terrain and uncertainty. For Marcus, arriving in country for his first operational deployment, it represented the transition from theoretical knowledge to life-and-death reality. Alpha Team 3-7 had been operating in the region for 6 months when Marcus joined them as their new communications sergeant. The team he was replacing had been wounded in an improvised explosive device attack 3 weeks earlier, leaving the unit temporarily without their critical communications capability. Marcus's arrival filled an urgent operational need, but it also meant integrating into a tight-knit team that had already bonded through shared combat experience. Team Sergeant Michael Tank Sullivan was a 20-year veteran with 4 previous deployments and a reputation for bringing his men home alive. At first meeting, Sullivan studied Marcus with the analytical gaze of someone who had learned to assess character quickly and accurately. Lives depended on understanding who could be trusted when situations deteriorated beyond planning and preparation. "Rodriguez, right?" Sullivan said during their initial meeting in the team room. "I've heard good things about your training performance, but out here, none of that matters until you prove yourself under fire. Your teammates are going to be watching everything you do, and they have every right to question whether you belong here until you show them otherwise." The team's other members reflected the diversity typical of Special Forces units. Staff Sergeant James Prophet Washington was the team medic, a soft-spoken former paramedic from Chicago who possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of trauma medicine and an almost supernatural ability to keep wounded men alive in impossible circumstances. Sergeant First Class David Hammer Kowalski served as the weapons specialist, a former Marine from Pittsburgh whose expertise with various weapon systems was matched only by his skill at improvising explosive devices from common materials. The team's officer was Captain Robert "Ghost" Anderson, a West Point graduate who had earned his nickname through an uncanny ability to move through hostile territory without being detected. Despite his privileged background, Anderson had proven himself through multiple deployments and was respected by his enlisted teammates for his tactical competence and his willingness to share the dangers he asked them to face. Marcus understood that earning acceptance within this group would require more than demonstrating technical competence with communication equipment. These men had survived ambushes, firefights, and complex operations where split-second decisions meant the difference between success and catastrophe. They needed to know that their new communications sergeant could function effectively when stress pushed human performance beyond normal limits. The team's area of operations encompassed a mountainous region where Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters moved freely between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Local tribal dynamics were complex and constantly shifting, with allegiances that changed based on factors ranging from ancient feuds to immediate tactical necessities. Previous teams had struggled to develop reliable intelligence networks, and several planned operations had been compromised by information leaks. Marcus's first mission involved establishing communication with a tribal leader who claimed to have information about foreign fighter movements in the region. Intelligence analysts believed the leader was genuine, but previous contact attempts had failed due to cultural misunderstandings and communication difficulties. The tribal leader spoke limited English, and previous American interpreters had failed to establish the personal connections necessary for sensitive intelligence sharing. The mission briefing revealed the complexity of the challenge. The tribal leader, known as Malik Rashid, controlled a strategically important valley that served as a transit route for foreign fighters. His cooperation could provide invaluable intelligence, but he had been burned by previous American promises that weren't kept, and was naturally suspicious of foreign military forces. Marcus spent hours studying cultural briefing materials and intelligence reports about the tribal dynamics in Malik Rashid's area. He learned that the leader had lost 2 sons to Taliban execution for allegedly cooperating with coalition forces, making his current willingness to provide information a significant risk that deserved respect and careful handling. The approach to Malik Rashid's compound required a helicopter insertion into a landing zone 3 kilometers away, followed by a movement through terrain that offered numerous ambush opportunities. Intelligence reports suggested that Taliban forces were actively patrolling the area, making detection a constant threat. If the team was compromised during the approach, they would face a difficult fighting withdrawal with limited support available. Marcus checked and double-checked his communication equipment during the flight to the insertion point. Primary and backup radios were functioning properly, satellite communication links were established, and emergency frequencies were programmed and tested. But equipment reliability was only one aspect of his responsibilities. If negotiations with Malik Rashid were successful, Marcus would need to establish communication protocols that protected the tribal leader's security while providing reliable intelligence flow. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, with the aircraft departing immediately after the team disembarked to minimize exposure time. A movement to Malik Rashid's compound took 2 hours through rocky terrain, but challenged both physical endurance and tactical discipline. Marcus carried the additional weight of communication equipment while maintaining the situational awareness necessary to detect potential threats. Captain Anderson had briefed the approach carefully, emphasizing the need to demonstrate respect for tribal customs while maintaining security protocols. The team would announce their arrival according to local tradition, but they would also maintain defensive positions in case the meeting was a trap. Marcus's role involved not just technical communication support, but cultural interpretation that could determine whether negotiations succeeded or failed. Malik Rashid's compound reflected the careful balance between tradition and security that characterized life in contested territory. Ancient stone walls surrounded modern defensive positions, while traditional greeting areas had been modified to provide cover from potential sniper fire. The tribal leader himself appeared to be in his 60s, with the weathered face and careful movements of someone who had survived decades of warfare. The initial greeting proceeded according to protocol, with Captain Anderson presenting gifts and expressing appropriate respect for Malik Rashid's position and authority. Marcus remained in the background initially, monitoring radio communications and maintaining security awareness. But as the conversation developed, cultural and linguistic challenges became apparent. The interpreter accompanying the team was technically competent but lacked the cultural sensitivity necessary for delicate negotiations. His translations were accurate but missed the subtle implications and cultural references that gave conversations their real meaning. Marcus began to notice disconnect between what Malik Rashid was trying to communicate and what the interpreter was conveying to Captain Anderson. The breakthrough came when Malik Rashid made a reference to a Quranic verse about protecting guests and strangers. The interpreter translated the words literally but missed the cultural significance of the reference. Marcus recognized the verse and its implications. The tribal leader was essentially offering the team his protection according to ancient hospitality traditions, but he was also testing whether the Americans understood and respected the cultural weight of such an offer. Marcus quietly approached Captain Anderson and explained the cultural significance of Malik Rashid's statement. Anderson, demonstrating the kind of tactical flexibility that made him an effective leader, allowed Marcus to respond directly to the tribal leader in Arabic. Marcus acknowledged the hospitality offer with appropriate cultural references and expressed understanding of the honor being extended to the team. The conversation dynamic changed immediately. Malik Rashid's demeanor shifted from cautious formality to genuine engagement as he realized that at least one of the Americans understood the cultural context of their interaction. Questions that had been answered with careful generalities began to receive detailed, specific information about foreign fighter movements, weapons caches, and planned operations. Marcus found himself serving as more than just a translator. His cultural knowledge and communication skills allowed him to ask follow-up questions that revealed additional intelligence layers. When Malik Rashid mentioned concerns about Taliban retaliation, Marcus was able to discuss security measures that addressed those concerns while maintaining operational security for coalition forces. The intelligence gathered during that first meeting proved invaluable. Malik Rashid provided detailed information about a planned Taliban attack on a nearby coalition outpost, allowing defensive preparations that saved numerous lives. He also revealed the location of weapons caches that had been supplying insurgent operations throughout the region. But the real significance of the meeting went beyond immediate intelligence gains. Marcus had demonstrated the kind of cultural competence and communication skills that opened doors previously closed to American forces. His ability to bridge cultural gaps created opportunities for intelligence development that wouldn't have existed with purely technical communication capabilities. Word of Marcus's success spread through the Special Forces community in Afghanistan. Other teams began requesting his assistance with culturally sensitive missions where language skills and cultural understanding were as important as tactical competence. Marcus found himself deployed on operations throughout the country, working with tribal leaders, government officials, and local security forces in situations where cultural missteps could have strategic consequences. Each mission brought new challenges and learning opportunities. Marcus worked with Pashtun leaders whose tribal codes hadn't changed in centuries, urban intellectuals who navigated between traditional values and modern realities, and former Taliban fighters who were considering switching sides in the conflict. Each interaction required different approaches and cultural sensitivity that went far beyond technical translation. The reputation Marcus was building extended beyond language and cultural skills. His teammates noted that he possessed an unusual ability to remain calm under pressure and to make sound decisions when circumstances deviated from planned approaches. During firefights, Marcus maintained communication links while providing tactical support. During complex negotiations, he balanced multiple priorities while ensuring mission objectives were achieved. Team Sergeant Sullivan, who had initially reserved judgment about Marcus's capabilities, became one of his strongest advocates. During team evaluations, Sullivan noted that Marcus had exceeded expectations in every measurable category. More importantly, Sullivan recommended Marcus for advanced leadership training, noting that he possessed the kind of mature judgment and cultural competence that would be needed for increasingly complex future operations. The transformation from new team member to trusted operator was complete when Marcus was selected to accompany a high-risk mission deep into Taliban-controlled territory. The operation involved contacting a potential source who claimed to have information about a planned attack on coalition headquarters in Kabul. The source was reliable, according to intelligence analysts, but the meeting location was in an area where Taliban forces had recently increased their presence. Marcus's role in the mission went beyond normal communication support. His cultural knowledge and language skills made him essential for evaluating the source's credibility and extracting maximum intelligence from the contact. If it failed, the team could be surrounded and overwhelmed in hostile territory with limited support available. The mission briefing emphasized the risks involved, but Marcus approached it with the same methodical preparation that had characterized his training. Equipment was checked multiple times. Contingency plans were developed for various scenarios, and cultural protocols were reviewed to ensure appropriate interaction with the source. As the team prepared to depart for the mission, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since his arrival in Afghanistan. The untested operator who had joined Alpha Team 37 had evolved into a trusted team member whose skills and judgment were valued by some of the most experienced Special Forces operators in the Army. The foundation built through years of training and preparation had proven solid enough to support the weight of operational responsibility. But Marcus also understood that each mission brought new tests and challenges. Success in previous operations didn't guarantee success in future ones. The enemy was adaptive and intelligent, always seeking to exploit weaknesses and turn American strengths against them. Complacency could be fatal, and every mission required the same careful preparation and tactical discipline that had characterized his most successful operations. The helicopter lifted off from the forward operating base carrying Alpha Team 37 toward what would become Marcus's most challenging mission to date. In the mountains ahead, Taliban fighters were waiting, unaware that their plans had been detected and that a small team of American Special Forces operators was coming to disrupt operations that could have changed the course of the war. Marcus checked his communication equipment one final time as the aircraft flew through the darkness toward their insertion point. Everything was functioning properly, backup systems were ready, and emergency procedures were rehearsed. But the real test wouldn't be technical. It would be human. Success would depend on reading people correctly, building trust across cultural boundaries, and making life or death decisions when standard procedures no longer applied. The foundation was solid, the training was complete, and the reputation was established. Now it was time to discover whether Marcus Rodriguez had truly earned his place among America's elite warriors. The intelligence source who had requested the meeting was known by the codename Nightingale, a former Taliban commander who had grown disillusioned with the movement's increasingly brutal tactics and foreign influence. According to preliminary reports, Nightingale possessed detailed knowledge of a planned attack on coalition headquarters in Kabul that could result in hundreds of casualties. The information was time-sensitive. The attack was scheduled within days, leaving little room for verification through normal intelligence channels. Alpha Team 3. 7 inserted into a mountainous region 3 hours before dawn, using night vision equipment to navigate terrain that would challenge even experienced mountaineers in daylight. The landing zone was located 8 kilometers from the meeting site, requiring a movement through territory that intelligence analysts rated as heavily contested. Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters used the area as a transit route between safe havens in Pakistan, making contact with enemy forces a constant possibility. Marcus carried additional communication equipment beyond his normal load, including specialized gear designed to maintain contact with higher headquarters during operations in areas where conventional radio communication was unreliable. The extra weight was significant, but the mission's importance justified the increased physical burden. If Nightingale's information proved accurate, the intelligence gathered could save hundreds of lives. The movement to the meeting site took 4 hours through rocky terrain that tested both physical endurance and tactical discipline. Captain Anderson led the team along routes that avoided known enemy positions while providing escape routes if the mission was compromised. Marcus monitored multiple communication frequencies during the movement, listening for indications that Taliban forces had detected their presence or that the meeting had been discovered by hostile intelligence networks. The meeting site was a remote valley that provided natural concealment while offering multiple exit routes if rapid evacuation became necessary. Nightingale had chosen the location carefully, demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that had made him an effective Taliban commander before his defection. The approach required the team to expose themselves crossing open ground, but alternative routes would have taken additional hours that they couldn't afford. Marcus established communication with higher headquarters 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time, confirming that extraction helicopters were available if needed, and that supporting units were positioned to respond to enemy contact. The communication procedures were complex, involving multiple frequencies and authentication codes designed to prevent Taliban forces from monitoring or interfering with team operations. Nightingale arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 2 bodyguards who remained at a respectful distance while the intelligence meeting proceeded. The former Taliban commander appeared to be in his 40s, with the weathered appearance and alert mannerisms of someone who had spent years surviving in hostile environments. His decision to cooperate with coalition forces represented an enormous personal risk that deserved careful handling and appropriate respect. Captain Anderson conducted the initial greeting according to protocols developed for high-value source meetings, but it became immediately apparent that cultural and linguistic challenges would complicate the intelligence gathering process. Nightingale spoke limited English, and the team's interpreter was struggling with dialect variations and cultural references that gave conversations their real meaning. Marcus observed the interaction for several minutes, noting points where communication difficulties were affecting information flow. When Nightingale began discussing the planned attack on Kabul, the interpreter was translating individual words accurately but missing the tactical concepts and operational implications that made the intelligence actionable. Captain Anderson, recognizing the problem, authorized Marcus to take over primary communication responsibilities. The transition was handled smoothly, with Marcus explaining his role and qualifications in fluent Arabic that immediately improved Nightingale's comfort level with the process. The former Taliban commander's demeanor shifted from cautious cooperation to genuine engagement as he realized he was dealing with someone who understood both his language and his cultural background. The intelligence that emerged over the next hour was extraordinary in its detail and operational significance. Nightingale revealed that the planned attack involved a coordinated assault using vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, followed by armed fighters who would exploit the chaos to penetrate coalition headquarters security. The operation was scheduled for the following week during a period when security measures would be reduced due to planned personnel rotations. But the intelligence was even more significant than initially apparent. Nightingale explained that the attack was being directed by foreign fighters with sophisticated planning capabilities and access to advanced explosive materials, the operation wasn't just another Taliban attack. It represented a new level of coordination and capability that could change the strategic balance in the region. Marcus's cultural knowledge proved crucial for extracting maximum intelligence value from the meeting. When Nightingale made references to specific individuals involved in the planning, Marcus was able to ask follow-up questions that revealed connections to broader terrorist networks. His understanding of regional dynamics allowed him to identify implications that might have been missed by operators with purely technical training. The conversation revealed that Nightingale's motivation for defecting went beyond simple disillusionment with Taliban tactics. His brother had been executed by foreign fighters for questioning operational decisions, and Nightingale himself had been targeted for elimination due to his growing influence among local Taliban commanders. His cooperation with coalition forces was partly motivated by personal survival, but it also reflected genuine concerns about foreign influence corrupting traditional Afghan resistance movements. This personal context was crucial for evaluating the intelligence's reliability and for understanding how to maintain Nightingale as a long-term source. Marcus recognized that the former Taliban commander needed more than financial compensation. He required assurance that his cooperation wouldn't result in retaliation against his remaining family members and that coalition forces understood the risks he was taking. The meeting had proceeded for 90 minutes when Marcus's communication equipment detected increased radio traffic on frequencies known to be used by Taliban forces in the area. The intercepts suggested that enemy units were conducting sweep operations that could bring them dangerously close to the meeting site. Marcus quietly informed Captain Anderson of the developing threat while maintaining normal conversation with Nightingale to avoid alarming the source. Anderson made the decision to conclude the meeting while the intelligence gathered was still fresh and before enemy forces could compromise the team's position. Marcus explained the situation to Nightingale in terms that emphasized concern for his safety rather than American operational security. The former Taliban commander appreciated the consideration and agreed to establish communication protocols for future meetings. The extraction from the meeting site required careful coordination between the team's movement and supporting units positioned to provide assistance if enemy contact occurred. Marcus maintained communication with higher headquarters while monitoring Taliban radio traffic that indicated enemy forces were moving closer to the team's location. The window for safe extraction was narrowing rapidly. The team moved quickly but carefully through terrain that offered concealment while providing route options if contact became unavoidable. Marcus carried the additional burden of communication equipment while maintaining the situational awareness necessary for tactical movement through hostile territory. The physical demands were significant, but the intelligence gathered justified the risk and effort. Contact with enemy forces came 2 kilometers from the extraction landing zone. A Taliban patrol spotted the team crossing a ridgeline and immediately opened fire with automatic weapons. Marcus found himself in his first sustained firefight as a Special Forces operator, facing the test that no amount of training could fully replicate. The team's response was immediate and coordinated. Captain Anderson maneuvered the team to covered positions while calling for close air support through Marcus's communication links. Staff Sergeant Washington treated a minor wound that Sergeant Kowalski suffered during the initial contact. Marcus maintained communication with supporting units while providing suppressive fire that kept Taliban fighters from advancing on the team's position. The firefight lasted 45 minutes, with Taliban reinforcements arriving to complicate the tactical situation. Marcus found himself managing multiple communication requirements simultaneously, coordinating close air support, requesting medical evacuation for Kowalski's wound, and maintaining contact with extraction helicopters that were delayed due to enemy fire in the landing zone. Under pressure that pushed human performance beyond normal limits, Marcus discovered that his training had prepared him well for the chaos and confusion of combat. His communication procedures remained disciplined despite the stress. His tactical awareness allowed him to contribute to the team's defense, and his cultural knowledge proved valuable for interpreting intercepted Taliban communications. The arrival of attack helicopters shifted the tactical balance decisively. Marcus coordinated airstrikes that scattered Taliban forces while guiding extraction helicopters to an alternative landing zone that offered better security. The team's extraction was successful, but the experience had tested every aspect of their training and preparation. During the flight back to base, Marcus reflected on his performance during his first significant combat engagement. The technical aspects of his job had been executed properly, but more importantly, he had remained effective under pressure that revealed character in ways that training never could. His teammates' confidence in his capabilities had been confirmed through shared danger and successful mission completion. the intelligence provided by Nightingale proved accurate in every detail. Coalition forces were able to prevent the planned attack on Kabul headquarters, potentially saving hundreds of lives and disrupting a terrorist network with international connections. The success generated requests for Marcus's involvement in similar operations where cultural competence and communication skills were as important as tactical ability, but the mission's significance extended beyond immediate intelligence gains. Marcus had demonstrated the kind of mature judgment and cultural competence that opened strategic opportunities for Special Forces operations. His ability to build trust across cultural boundaries and to extract maximum intelligence value from sensitive sources made him a valuable asset for increasingly complex missions. Team Sergeant Sullivan's evaluation of Marcus's performance emphasized not just technical competence, but leadership potential that suggested readiness for increased responsibility. Sullivan noted that Marcus had exceeded expectations during his most challenging test and recommended him for advanced leadership training that would prepare him for team leadership positions. The recommendation carried significant weight within the Special Forces community. Sullivan's reputation for developing effective operators was well established, and his assessments were trusted by senior leaders responsible for personnel assignments and promotion decisions. Marcus's selection for leadership development represented recognition that his potential extended beyond his current role as a communications specialist. The advanced leadership course would take Marcus away from operational deployment for 6 months of intensive training designed to prepare selected personnel for team leadership positions. The program covered everything from advanced tactics to personnel management to the strategic considerations that influenced Special Forces mission planning. Completion would qualify Marcus for promotion to senior non-commissioned officer ranks and assignment to leadership positions. The opportunity represented a significant career advancement, but it also meant leaving a team that had become like family through shared danger and successful missions. Marcus had developed close working relationships with Anderson, Sullivan, Washington, and Kowalski that went beyond professional collaboration. These men had trusted him with their lives, and he had proven worthy of that trust through performance under fire. As Marcus prepared to depart Afghanistan for the leadership course, he understood that his career had reached a turning point. The foundation built through years of training and preparation had proven solid enough to support operational responsibilities. The reputation earned through successful missions had opened doors to advancement opportunities that would define his future military service. But Marcus also recognized that increased responsibility would bring new challenges that would test different aspects of his character and capabilities. Leadership positions required skills that went beyond technical competence. They demanded the ability to make strategic decisions under uncertainty and to bear responsibility for other men's lives and careers. The young man who had once been dismissed as an unlikely candidate for Special Forces had evolved into an operator whose skills and judgment were valued by some of the most experienced warriors in the American military. The transformation had been earned through years of dedication, sacrifice, and performance under pressure that revealed character in its truest form. The next phase of Marcus's journey would test whether the foundation built through operational experience was strong enough to support the weight of leadership responsibility. In training environments designed to break down individual capabilities and build them back stronger, Marcus would discover whether he possessed the qualities necessary to lead other Special Forces operators in missions where failure could have strategic consequences. The airplane carrying Marcus away from Afghanistan also carried the knowledge that he had proven himself worthy of the trust his teammates had placed in him. The real test had come not in training environments, but in hostile mountains where mistakes cost lives and success required more than following procedures. Marcus had passed that test, earning his place among America's elite warriors through performance that spoke louder than any formal recognition. The foundation was solid, the reputation was earned, and the potential for leadership had been recognized. Now it was time to discover whether Marcus Rodriguez could evolve from an outstanding operator into the kind of leader that other outstanding operators would follow into danger. The Special Forces Advanced Leaders course at Fort Bragg represented the pinnacle of professional military education for non-commissioned officers. The 6-month program brought together the most promising team leaders from across the Special Forces community, creating an environment where proven operators competed for selection to the most challenging leadership positions in the Army. Marcus arrived at the course with a reputation that preceded him. His operational successes in Afghanistan had been documented in after-action reports that circulated through Special Forces channels, and several of his fellow students had heard accounts of his cultural competence and tactical performance from mutual colleagues. The expectations were high, but so was the competition from operators with equally impressive backgrounds. The course instructor cadre included some of the most experienced Special Forces leaders in the Army. Sergeant Major Robert Thunder Mackenzie was a 30-year veteran with multiple combat deployments who had personally led some of the most successful operations in recent military history. His standards were legendary, and his assessment of leadership potential carried enormous weight in assignment and promotion decisions. Gentlemen, Sergeant Major Mackenzie addressed the assembled students during the initial briefing. You're here because you've proven yourselves as individual operators. But leadership requires different skills than technical competence. You'll be tested on your ability to make strategic decisions under uncertainty, to develop other men's potential, and to bear responsibility for mission success when failure isn't an option. The curriculum was designed to push students beyond their individual comfort zones and into scenarios where success required more than personal excellence. Leadership exercises simulated the complex challenges that team leaders faced in real operations, managing personality conflicts within teams, making resource allocation decisions under pressure, and maintaining mission focus when circumstances deviated significantly from planned approaches. Marcus found himself grouped with 11 other students representing diverse backgrounds and specialties. The team included a former Ranger Battalion commander who had transitioned to Special Forces, a communications specialist with multiple deployments to Africa, and a medical sergeant who had saved dozens of lives during complex operations in Iraq and Syria. The initial exercises focused on individual assessment, with each student rotating through leadership positions during scenarios designed to reveal character under pressure. Marcus discovered that his operational experience had prepared him well for technical challenges, but leading other proven leaders required different skills than managing communication networks or building relationships with foreign sources. His first significant test came during a scenario that simulated a complex hostage rescue operation. Marcus was assigned as team leader for a mission that required coordinating multiple elements, managing time-sensitive intelligence, and making tactical decisions with incomplete information. The exercise was designed to overwhelm leaders with conflicting priorities and impossible timelines. The scenario involved American civilians held by terrorists in a compound that intelligence analysts couldn't fully penetrate. Marcus had to develop an assault plan using limited resources, while managing team members who had their own strong opinions about tactical approaches. The exercise tested not just technical competence, but the ability to synthesize different perspectives into coherent operational plans. Marcus approached the challenge by drawing upon lessons learned from his operational deployment. Rather than trying to control every aspect of the planning process, he established clear objectives and allowed team members to contribute their expertise within defined parameters. His communication skills proved valuable for building consensus among strong-willed individuals who were accustomed to being in charge. The breakthrough came when Marcus recognized that the exercise was testing leadership philosophy as much as tactical competence. Instead of trying to demonstrate personal brilliance, he focused on creating conditions where his team could perform at their highest level. His role became facilitating excellence rather than providing all the answers personally. The mission plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity, while incorporating sophisticated tactical concepts from each team member's area of expertise. The assault was successful, with all hostages recovered and minimal casualties among the assault force. But the instructors were more interested in the planning process than the tactical execution. During the after-action review, Sergeant Major Mackenzie noted that Marcus had demonstrated mature leadership judgment that typically took years of command experience to develop. Rather than micromanaging the planning process, Marcus had created an environment where team members felt ownership in the mission's success. The result was a plan that incorporated the best thinking from multiple experienced operators. The success established Marcus as one of the course's top performers, but it also attracted increased scrutiny from instructors who were looking for weaknesses that might emerge under greater pressure. Subsequent exercises became progressively more challenging, testing leadership capabilities in scenarios where standard approaches failed and creative solutions were required. One particularly difficult exercise involved managing a team where personality conflicts threatened mission success. Marcus found himself leading a group that included 2 students who had fundamental disagreements about tactical approaches and couldn't work together effectively. The situation simulated leadership challenges that occurred in real units where personal compatibility couldn't be guaranteed. Marcus's approach involved individual counseling sessions where he addressed the underlying issues causing the conflict while maintaining focus on mission requirements. His cultural sensitivity and communication skills proved valuable for understanding different perspectives and finding common ground that allowed productive collaboration. The resolution required Marcus to make difficult personnel decisions that demonstrated his willingness to prioritize mission success over personal relationships. When counseling failed to resolve the personality conflict, Marcus removed one of the conflicting students from a key position and restructured the team to minimize friction while maintaining operational capability. The instructors noted that Marcus had handled a complex leadership challenge with maturity and decisiveness that reflected well-developed judgment about human nature and team dynamics. His willingness to make unpopular decisions when necessary suggested readiness for the kind of leadership positions where tactical success depended on managing difficult personalities under stress. As the course progressed, Marcus found himself increasingly selected for the most challenging leadership positions in complex exercises. His reputation for sound judgment and effective team management made him a natural choice for scenarios where failure would have strategic implications. The additional responsibility was both recognition and test of his leadership potential. The capstone exercise was a week-long operation that simulated a strategic reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines. Marcus was selected as overall mission commander, responsible for planning and executing an operation that involved multiple teams, complex logistics, and coordination with higher headquarters. The exercise tested every aspect of leadership development covered during the 6-month course. The mission scenario involved infiltrating a denied area to gather intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. Marcus had to coordinate the insertion of 3 teams, establish communication networks in hostile territory, and extract actionable intelligence while avoiding detection by a sophisticated enemy force played by experienced instructors. The planning phase required Marcus to synthesize intelligence from multiple sources, develop contingency plans for various scenarios, and brief senior leaders on mission objectives and risk assessments. His operational experience proved valuable for understanding the practical challenges that teams would face, while his communication skills were essential for coordinating complex logistics. The execution phase tested Marcus's ability to command distributed operations where direct supervision was impossible, and success depended on the competence and initiative of subordinate leaders. Teams operated independently while maintaining coordination through communication networks that Marcus had designed and implemented. Contact with enemy forces came on the 3rd day when one of the infiltration teams was detected during a reconnaissance mission. Marcus found himself managing a crisis that required rapid decision-making, while maintaining focus on the overall mission objectives. The situation tested his ability to balance competing priorities while providing clear guidance to subordinate commanders. Marcus's response demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that distinguished effective leaders from competent operators. Instead of becoming focused on the immediate crisis, he maintained awareness of how the situation affected broader mission objectives and made decisions that preserved operational capability while ensuring the safety of exposed team members. The successful extraction of the compromised team required coordination between all 3 infiltration elements and supporting units. Marcus orchestrated the operation through communication networks, while providing tactical guidance that allowed subordinate commanders to adapt their individual missions to support the overall effort. The mission was completed successfully, with all intelligence objectives achieved and all personnel extracted safely, despite enemy contact that had threatened to compromise the entire operation. The instructors noted that Marcus had demonstrated exceptional leadership under pressure that suggested readiness for the most challenging command positions in Special Forces. Sergeant Major Mackenzie's final evaluation was unequivocal in its assessment of Marcus's leadership potential. The evaluation noted that Marcus possessed rare combination of tactical competence, cultural awareness, and mature judgment that qualified him for immediate assignment to senior leadership positions. Mackenzie recommended Marcus for selection to the most demanding command opportunities available. The graduation ceremony was attended by senior Special Forces leaders who were evaluating course graduates for assignment to critical positions throughout the community. Marcus's performance had earned him recognition as one of the top graduates, opening doors to leadership opportunities that would define his future military career. But the real significance of Marcus's success extended beyond personal advancement. His journey from troubled teenager to respected Special Forces leader demonstrated that excellence could emerge from unexpected backgrounds when character was tested through genuine adversity and developed through dedicated effort. The assignment that followed graduation exceeded even Marcus's ambitious expectations. He was selected to serve as Team Sergeant for Alpha Team 2-4. A unit preparing for deployment to a classified location where Special Forces capabilities would be tested against sophisticated enemy forces with advanced training and equipment. The position represented enormous responsibility and opportunity. Team sergeants were the senior non-commissioned officers responsible for training, mentoring, and leading 12-man Special Forces teams in operations where success often determines strategic outcomes. The role required technical excellence, leadership competence, and the ability to make life-or-death decisions under pressure that pushed human performance beyond normal limits. Marcus's new team included some of the most experienced operators in Special Forces, men who had proven themselves through multiple deployments and who expected their team sergeant to demonstrate competence that matched their own proven capabilities. Earning their respect would require more than formal authority. It would demand performance under pressure that validated his selection for the position. The team's area of operations would test every aspect of Marcus's development as a leader and operator. Intelligence reports suggested that enemy forces possessed capabilities that challenged traditional Special Forces advantages in training, equipment, and tactical innovation. Success would require adaptive leadership that could respond to changing circumstances while maintaining mission focus under extreme pressure. As Marcus prepared for his first assignment as a team sergeant, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The angry teenager who had once seen authority as the enemy and evolved into a leader that other proven warriors were willing to follow. The transformation had been earned through years of dedicated effort, tested through genuine adversity, and validated through performance that spoke louder than any formal recognition. But Marcus also understood that leadership brought responsibilities that extended far beyond personal success or recognition. The decisions he made would affect not just mission outcomes, but the lives and careers of the men he led. The weight of that responsibility was both humbling and motivating, representing the culmination of everything he had worked to achieve. The foundation built through years of training, operational experience, and leadership development was about to face its ultimate test. In hostile territory where enemy forces possessed sophisticated capabilities, Marcus Rodriguez would discover whether he had truly earned his place among America's elite military leaders. The next chapter of his journey would require more than technical competence or tactical knowledge. It would demand the kind of character that could inspire other exceptional men to follow him into danger, the judgment to make strategic decisions under uncertainty, and the strength to bear responsibility for outcomes that could affect national security interests. Marcus was ready for the challenge. The foundation was solid, the preparation was complete, and the reputation was earned through performance that had been tested in the crucible of real operations. Now it was time to discover whether the young man from Detroit's streets had truly evolved into the kind of leader that American Special Forces needed for the challenges ahead. Alpha Team 2-4 was scheduled to deploy to the mountains of eastern Syria, where intelligence analysts had identified a sophisticated terrorist training facility operated by foreign fighters with advanced capabilities and international connections. The facility represented a new evolution in terrorist operations, combining traditional insurgency tactics with modern technology and professional military training that challenged conventional counterterrorism approaches. Marcus assumed command of the team 3 months before deployment, using the preparation period to assess individual capabilities and to develop the unit cohesion necessary for success in complex operations. His 12-man team included operators with diverse backgrounds and specialties, each bringing unique skills that needed to be integrated into an effective fighting unit. The team's weapons specialist was Master Sergeant Carlos Viper Mendoza, a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments who had earned a reputation for innovative approaches to tactical problems. The medic was Staff Sergeant Timothy Doc Patterson, whose medical expertise had saved dozens of lives during previous deployments and who possessed the calm demeanor essential for trauma care under fire. Sergeant First Class Michael Compass Turner served as the team's intelligence specialist, bringing analytical capabilities and cultural knowledge that would be crucial for operating in Syrian territory. The communications specialist was Sergeant David Radio Kim, whose technical expertise with advanced systems complemented Marcus's own communication background. The team's engineer was Staff Sergeant Robert Demo Washington, whose explosive expertise and mechanical knowledge made him invaluable for both offensive operations and infrastructure tasks. The remaining team members included specialists in various combat skills, each selected for demonstrated competence and proven ability to function effectively under stress. Marcus's first challenge involved earning the respect of operators who had served together for months and who had developed working relationships based on shared experience. As an outsider assuming leadership of an established team, Marcus needed to demonstrate competence that validated his selection while respecting the team dynamics that already existed. His approach emphasized collaborative planning and individual development rather than authoritarian control. Marcus spent time with each team member individually, understanding their backgrounds, capabilities, and concerns about the upcoming deployment. He identified areas where additional training could improve performance, while building personal relationships that would be crucial during combat operations. The team's mission briefing revealed the complexity of their operational environment. The target facility was located in mountainous terrain that provided natural defensive advantages while offering multiple escape routes for enemy personnel. Intelligence suggested that the facility housed between 50 and 100 fighters from various international backgrounds, many with professional military training and access to advanced weapons. Syrian government forces had attempted to assault the facility twice, resulting in significant casualties and tactical failure. The terrorist group had demonstrated sophisticated defensive capabilities, including coordinated fire teams, prepared positions, and electronic countermeasures that degraded communication systems. Previous intelligence collection efforts had failed due to the facility's remote location and advanced security measures. Marcus's team would be inserted into Syrian territory covertly, establish surveillance of the target facility, and develop actionable intelligence for a larger operation designed to eliminate the terrorist training capability. The mission required extended operations in denied territory with minimal support, placing enormous demands on team self-sufficiency and tactical competence. The preparation phase involved intensive training that tested every aspect of team capabilities. Marcus designed exercises that simulated the challenges they would face in Syria, from movement through hostile territory to sustained operations without resupply. His leadership philosophy emphasized preparing for worst-case scenarios while maintaining focus on mission objectives. One particular training exercise became legendary within the Special Forces community. Marcus had arranged for his team to conduct a week-long operation in the mountains of Colorado during winter conditions that simulated the challenges they would face in Syria. The exercise was designed to test team cohesion under extreme stress while validating equipment and procedures. The scenario involved the team being inserted into hostile territory with limited supplies and instructions to establish surveillance of a target facility while avoiding detection by opposing forces. Weather conditions included sub-zero temperatures, high winds, and limited visibility that made navigation and communication extremely difficult. Marcus's leadership was tested when the team's primary communication equipment failed during the second day, eliminating their ability to maintain contact with higher headquarters. Standard procedures called for mission termination if communication couldn't be re-established, but Marcus made the decision to continue the exercise using backup systems and field expedient solutions. The decision proved controversial, with some team members who questioned whether Marcus was taking unnecessary risks for training purposes. The disagreement came to a head during a team meeting where Sergeant Mendoza openly challenged Marcus's judgment, arguing that mission termination was the appropriate response to equipment failure. Marcus handled the confrontation with the kind of mature leadership that had characterized his development through various training programs. Rather than asserting authority based on rank, he explained his reasoning in terms of mission requirements and learning objectives. He acknowledged the validity of Mendoza's concerns while maintaining focus on the training value of continuing despite equipment problems. The resolution came when Marcus offered to take personal responsibility for the decision, while allowing team members to express their concerns through appropriate channels after the exercise. His willingness to bear responsibility for controversial decisions demonstrated the kind of leadership character that earned respect through performance rather than formal authority. The exercise concluded successfully, with the team accomplishing all objectives despite equipment failures and adverse weather conditions. More importantly, the shared adversity had strengthened team cohesion and validated Marcus's leadership approach under genuine stress. Team members who had questioned his decisions became advocates for his command philosophy. Sergeant Major Mackenzie, who had been monitoring the exercise, noted in his evaluation that Marcus had demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure. The decision to continue despite equipment failure had provided valuable training that wouldn't have been available under normal conditions. Mackenzie recommended that Marcus's approach be incorporated into future training curricula. As deployment approached, Marcus's team had evolved into a cohesive unit whose individual capabilities were enhanced through effective integration and leadership. Training scores consistently exceeded standards, and team members expressed confidence in their collective ability to handle the challenges that awaited them in Syria. The intelligence briefing for their actual deployment revealed additional complexity beyond the original mission parameters. Recent analysis suggested that the terrorist training facility was being used to prepare operatives for attacks against Western targets, making its elimination a high priority for national security interests. The operation had been elevated to strategic significance with oversight from the highest levels of government. Marcus found himself commanding a mission that could affect international counter-terrorism efforts and regional stability. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but his preparation had been thorough, and his team was ready for the challenge. Years of training, operational experience, and leadership development had prepared him for exactly this kind of high-stakes mission. The insertion into Syrian territory proceeded according to plan, with the team infiltrating through mountainous terrain that provided concealment while offering route options for extraction if the mission was compromised. Marcus's communication protocols ensured reliable contact with supporting units while maintaining operational security necessary for success in denied territory. Establishing surveillance of the target facility required 3 days of careful movement through terrain that was patrolled by enemy security forces. Marcus's team operated with the kind of tactical discipline that made detection unlikely while gathering intelligence that exceeded all expectations for detail and operational value. The facility was larger and more sophisticated than intelligence estimates had suggested. Marcus counted more than 150 fighters with equipment and training that indicated professional military support. The defensive positions were expertly designed, and the daily routine suggested operational security measures that would make assault operations extremely costly. But Marcus also identified weaknesses that could be exploited by forces with appropriate capabilities and careful planning. His team's extended observation revealed patterns in security procedures, gaps in defensive coverage, and logistical vulnerabilities that weren't apparent from satellite imagery or previous intelligence collection efforts. The intelligence that Marcus transmitted to higher headquarters resulted in a complete revision of operational planning. The facility represented a more significant threat than originally assessed, but it also presented opportunities for strategic impact that justified increased resources and risk. A larger operation was authorized based on Marcus's team's reconnaissance findings. The expanded mission brought additional Special Forces teams into the area, under Marcus's overall command. His role evolved from team leader to task force commander, responsible for coordinating multiple units in a complex operation that would test every aspect of his leadership development and tactical competence. The assault on the terrorist facility commenced at dawn on a clear morning, when weather conditions favored coalition forces. Marcus coordinated the operation from a command position that allowed him to observe the battle while maintaining communication with all participating units. His coordination was flawless, with different elements moving according to precisely timed sequences that maximized tactical advantage. The battle lasted 6 hours, with enemy forces offering fierce resistance that validated intelligence estimates about their training and capability. Marcus's tactical decisions during the engagement demonstrated strategic thinking that maximized mission success while minimizing friendly casualties. His communication skills proved essential for coordinating close air support and medical evacuation under combat conditions. The facility was completely destroyed, with intelligence materials captured that revealed plans for attacks against targets in Europe and North America. More than 120 enemy fighters were killed or captured, effectively eliminating a terrorist capability that had threatened international security. The operation was hailed as one of the most successful counter-terrorism missions in recent history. Marcus's performance during the operation earned recognition that extended far beyond Special Forces channels. Senior military leaders noted that his tactical competence and leadership capabilities suggested readiness for the most challenging command positions available. His success opened doors to advancement opportunities that would define his future military career. But for Marcus, the real significance of the mission lay in the validation it provided for the journey he had traveled from Detroit's streets to Syria's mountains. The angry teenager who had once been dismissed as an unlikely military candidate had evolved into a leader whose tactical competence and cultural awareness had strategic impact on national security operations. The recognition came during a ceremony attended by senior government officials and military leaders. Marcus was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's second highest decoration for valor, in recognition of his exceptional leadership during the Syrian operation. The citation specifically noted his tactical competence, cultural awareness, and mature judgment under pressure. As Marcus stood at attention during the ceremony, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. Every challenge he had faced, every setback he had overcome, and every lesson he had learned had prepared him for the responsibilities he now carried. The foundation built through years of dedicated effort had proven strong enough to support the weight of strategic responsibility. But Marcus also understood that recognition brought obligation to continue serving at the highest level. His success had opened doors to advancement opportunities that would test different aspects of his character and capabilities. The next phase of his career would require evolution from tactical excellence to strategic thinking that could influence military operations at the highest levels. The phone call came 3 days after the award ceremony. It was Sergeant Major Mackenzie, now serving in a strategic planning position at Special Operations Command Headquarters. Mackenzie explained that Marcus had been selected for assignment to a position that would utilize his operational experience and cultural competence at the strategic level. "Rodriguez," Mackenzie said during their conversation, "you've proven that excellence can emerge from anywhere if character is properly developed. Now we need you to help develop the next generation of Special Forces leaders. Your experience and perspective are exactly what we need for the challenges ahead." The assignment would take Marcus away from operational units and into the world of strategic planning and leadership development. It represented recognition of his evolution from individual operator to strategic thinker whose insights could influence military operations at the highest levels. The journey from troubled teenager to strategic military leader was complete. Years later, when Marcus was training new Special Forces candidates, he would often think about the moment when everything changed. It wasn't during a specific battle or operation, but rather during a quiet conversation in the mountains of Afghanistan when Malik Rashid had acknowledged his cultural understanding with a simple phrase in Arabic. That moment had opened doors to opportunities that shaped his entire career. It demonstrated that excellence in military service required more than technical competence. It demanded the kind of cultural awareness and human understanding that allowed Americans to work effectively with people from different backgrounds and perspectives. Marcus's story became part of Special Forces lore, cited as an example of how character development and dedicated effort could transform potential into performance that had strategic impact. New candidates would hear about the communications sergeant who became a strategic leader through competence, cultural awareness, and the kind of mature judgment that emerged from genuine adversity. But for Marcus, the real significance of his journey lay in the opportunities it created to develop other men's potential. His role in training future Special Forces leaders allowed him to pass on lessons learned through years of operational experience while helping others discover their own paths to excellence. The foundation built through years of struggle had proven solid enough to support not just individual success, but the development of others who would carry on the mission of protecting American interests and values around the world. Marcus Rodriguez had traveled far from Detroit's streets, but he had never forgotten the lessons learned there about resilience, determination, and the power of believing in possibilities that others couldn't see. In the end, the young man who had once been laughed at as an unlikely military candidate had become exactly the kind of leader that America needed. Someone whose character had been tested through genuine adversity and whose competence had been proven through performance that mattered when everything was at stake. The laughter had been replaced by respect earned through service that spoke louder than any words. The Iron Wolf had found his pack, and the pack had found its leader,